You see out in the engine bay now that a few of the machined up parts are made. So this is the little piece you saw on the milling machine there earlier. So you can see now this is the standard Mark IV boost pressure sensor. So it just basically screws on there, and there's a little O-ring then which fits into the hole, and this part of the sensor protrudes out. So this is going to be a hole drilled along the pipe here somewhere, like I was saying there, and this guy's going to be popped in and welded on. One of the other parts I made in the lathe there that you saw is this part here. So it is to adapt this aluminium pipe to the standard Mark IV elbow that I cut. So that's that guy there. So I have this made as a press fit into that, and you can see where the two pieces of metal meet here. So what I'll be doing is I'll run a piece of weld all around here. So that'll be that piece finished. On the intercooler side of things then, I've got a little mount made at the bottom at the minute. I'll show you that. And the pipe work is coming up here. I've just started making this clamp here. It's just a strip of stainless bent around, bit of heat shrink over at the minute. I don't have it heated down, and I've just some holes drilling for some screws, and I've got a piece of tape on the chassis leg of the car here. So at the minute what I've done is I've just marked out the two holes. I've got a black pin, so black pin, black paint don't work, so I'll just put a bit of paper tape over it. And what I'm kind of doing here is kind of lining up this guy here like this, and basically lifting up the pipe. until I'm happy with the height of it. Keeping in mind what I'm trying to do here as well is kind of trying to keep it square with the water bottle and keep it enough distance away so it doesn't be tipping off if the engine's moving around a bit. I've also made an adapter in here as well to adapt the standard rubber pipe from the turbo outlet side onto this part of the pipe here. As I mentioned earlier, is the other half of this guy, so he's just cut, so that works in nice there. I think I'm going to trim this guy back just a small bit, maybe about 5 more mil, just to get the angle here just about right. I mean, it's just slightly crooked there to the water bottle, maybe a bit anal, but that's what I want to do. I've also got a piece machined up and pushed in here, and just about make it out there maybe. The machine piece is here, so there's not much of a difference between the diameter of this pipe here and where the clamp goes on here. So there's only about 2 mil or odd to make up in radius, I suppose, or maybe 4 in diameter. So it's 2 each side. So that piece is just pushed on over there for a second. So that'll get a run of weld either here or on the inside of the pipe. So this next guy then is I have a sheet piece machined up here as well on the dump pipe. So I'm going to drill a hole here and fit that and weld that on there somewhere. So for the boost or the actuator on the turbo, just another piece of pipe machined up here, a little barb on top of it, and he is going to be welded in around here somewhere. So I'll figure out those little spots in a while and mount this guy up here. And then once I start putting the clamps on the pipes, that should be the pipework for the boost sorted. And I'll just make up another little bracket surrounding this piece here in rubber and mount it onto the car out here someplace. I'm not sure exactly here, whatever the most convenient spot is. So this guy isn't going to be fixed rigidly to the car. I'll show you the bracket in a while what I've made down here, and I have made it so to allow a little bit of movement on the intercooler, so just not have everything rigid, just in case it causes any problems. So I'm getting close now to doing a bit of welding again, and what I'm going to do here for the air filter is, like I was saying, make up a piece for here. Use some 70mm silicone hose, maybe a 45 metal bend, and put an air filter. Maybe I might go straight like this, just run this guy straight to it. I might put a bit of a bend in it like this if I can fit it in. Maybe use a slightly smaller air filter and then just mount that onto the car there somewhere, and that would be the air intake sorted out then. Once that's welded up, the next thing I will do after that then is connect up the fuel, and we're starting to get ready then to see a bit of action on the engine. This is a handy little tool you'd be typically using in a machine shop. You've got this sharp edge here and it's free to rotate. So as you travel around a pipe, for example, something like this, maybe like that, as you travel it rotates, so you don't have to rotate the tool in your hand. Gives you a nice clean finished edge, removes the burrs, does a good job. Handy to have. What I like to do with the rev nuts is I give them a little bit toothbrush, kind of a copper style grease there, and the idea is that when it's inside in the hole, that hopefully it'll help protect it from corrosion, because you can't really paint the inside of the metal there when it's been placed in. So I stick the brush in a little bit as well, a little bit of excess there, no harm. We've got two holes here, hard to see the second one on the camera, some of the cables and stuff are blocking it. Then putting these guys in then. bit of a pull, wind in the tool a little bit, and typically 2 is enough. Wind the tool back out. The particular nut rivets I'm using here are there, and they're in focus here. You can see there is, if I stop moving around, maybe it might help. You can see there's a very, very light lip on them. So these are kind of a chamfered one. And when these are pinched in, they actually finish flush, which is a nice little feature. So if you run your hands across them, they don't, I suppose, stick out past the metal of the car. So when you bolt your bracket on, the bracket is up against the metal of the car. Just going to stick on the second one there now. So just wind them on the hand. And painted the grease right around them. No point sparing it. And back down to the second hole. There, for M6s, there's initially when you pull on this hand tool here, it's a bit of a drag, but once you get it to start to crunch, I suppose, or compress, it goes easy the rest of the way after that. So now what I have is my 2 nut rivets in place. A little bit of grease around there, no harm. Maybe I might just leave that behind the bracket there now. Wouldn't do any harm at all. So bolt on my pipes again to see how everything fits. This is one of the parts I machined up. You see what I mean now by it's just a very thin wall on it. This is not ideal, of course, for welding. It's very light. But if some of the weld does protrude past the machine surface, I can easily just rub it down with a belt sander or something like that. A very slight lip up here, and of course that is just when the clamp is around the rubber hose, prevent it pulling over. What I can do, of course, here is I can actually weld this on the inside, that being around here. So I've left a slight bit of metal here extra. So the idea is that hopefully I'll be able to weld it in just by puddling it, and maybe no rod at all. Of course, the straighter you cut these pipes when you're cutting them up, the better. So I've got this one fairly good there. Just give it a run of a belt sander. Get it nice and flat, no gaps, and it makes the welding a bit neater. It's time to fit back in the air pipe now for an old trial fit. So this guy just simply plugs in here. Our air pipe. The second air pipe is just a little bit of a push there. Get on over the bar. Maybe I could do it, make it slightly smaller, but it goes in, no problem. And in my bracket here, and I'll just get some screws now. Tighten up that. Screws I'm using are these dome type screws. These are stainless, just M6, a little washer on them there. And these guys, I like these guys. No rust. I put in these guys, I always put them in loose at first, in case you need any wiggle room or anything, rather than tightening up one and then finding a bit of a struggle. Of course, these were M6, for the clearance holes in the bracket, I'd be kind of looking at 6.5 as a minimum, probably 7 really. Plenty of length in these screws. Just use the air tool here to run these guys in. So I've bolted up this guy in. The heat shrink is handy stuff. Stop the bracket getting marked up, I suppose, the piping getting marked up. This bracket's made out of quite light material, made of a millimeter. It's not that it has to hold the pipe, it's really that rigid inside of that. I like the sound of an Alteza. So, just needs a bit of shape setting there. There we go. A bit more. So this is kind of what I was after here. It's just to kind of keep this guy parallel here, because there's another bit of a bend there. Keep that guy kind of parallel there. Get a bit more away from the water button than that. So when I put all the clamps on the hose there, it'll tighten everything up. And this guy here, once the clamp goes on this fella here, it'll tighten the whole thing up there. And the next thing to do now is just mark out where these guys will go. So I think I'll put one here. And I'm just using the standard pipes here. And I think I'll just put the other one, the one for the turbo itself, maybe. I think I'll put one for the pressure to the for the actual turbo. The pipe, standard pipe, seems to want to do something like this, but I think if I sit it on there like that, it'll look kind of neat and meaningful. So I'll mark those guys up. I could actually put this one here, although it looks more relaxed there from a fit point of view. Standard pipe there. So just mark those guys, drill those holes. And that's the boost pipe. As good as complete. Got a little bracket for that. So here's some of my boost pipe work here. Here's the bracket I made in the mill. A friend of mine welded it on there for me. It's aluminium. I don't have the ability to weld aluminium at home. Did a really neat job there. Quite happy with that now. And we've got a little fitting welded on here for this is for the blow off valve. Return to the inlet manifold. And this guy here is used by one of the valves going to the turbo. Can't remember which one now. So here's my fitting here welded on to adapt. Let's adapt this metal pipe to the standard Volkswagen rubbers, and I have something similar done down here as well. This is to get it into the inlet manifold. So I'm just using the Volkswagen pipe down there again, like I showed earlier. So he just got a little run of weld around there as well. So when you're making these guys up, if you make them up sort of just snug fitting, just tap them in. It's really easy, puddle them in then afterwards. Makes life a little bit easier for the man that's doing a bit of welding. So that's that bit sorted. So this is my intercooler mount bracket for the bottom. It's a fairly simple affair. This is the block of rubber that can slide over and back. Of course, it is going to be captive. Inside in the middle as well, I've got kind of like what looks like a rubber washer for all the world. And I made this guy with little slots so I could move him in, and the idea was, well, I started off out here first, I suppose, and then I moved these, flattened these guys out a bit. So then I needed to move this in a bit to get a bit more clearance for the radiator. While it didn't have to be done, the intercooler was pretty close to the fins in the radiator, and I suppose if the roads got rough or things started moving around a little bit, there was always a risk of the intercooler tipping off the radiator. And while I say maybe a small few fins dented mightn't make any difference really, you just leave that intercooler tipping off the radiator long enough, and I guarantee you it'll wear through the tubes because they're really, really light walled, and you'll be looking at a radiator leak, and it'll probably happen at the most inopportune moment. So caution is that's what I'm doing here. It's just my way of doing things. So this guy allows a little bit of movement over and back, so when I'm positioning it up, it doesn't move in or out because the lips, you can see them in the picture there or not. So there you are. So the top one then is very, very similar in design. It just bolts onto a different location in the car. So I'm just going to fitting up the intercooler now, and I'll show you that once I get a few bits and pieces on. So here I have my boost pipe mounted in. I haven't got that clip tightened yet, just in case I've got to remove it for anything. So leave that kind of thing till the very last. So you can see the general run of things here. So this is a standard Mark IV item. This is also a standard Mark IV item, but it fits down over where the throttle body intake would have been, part of this guy here. Continued on then, it's the feed for one of the boost valves there. This is the blow off valve itself. So this is where the pressure is relieved from here back through the blow off valve and into the inlet. And there's my pipework then continuing down. The kit came with these clamps, which are nice, but you do get a lot of thread hanging out half them if you tighten them up. So I think I'm going to have to nip that off here and there, make it look a bit tidier. So I've turned as many of them away from view as much as possible. So you can see it there at my intercooler. This is the other clamp I have made here. It's kind of like a block of rubber here with a hole in it that fits onto a nub that's welded onto this. This is folded here because I initially made this a little bit too long, so I just kind of doubled the metal up on itself. So I guess it kind of acts like a little bit of a spring or something, but that's not meant. And you can see over here then where the boost pressure is read from. So I'll get a better shot there. So there he is, bolted in there. And just from a view then, from a radiator point of view, I have it so that it is well out of the line. So the radiator will be flush, or kind of flush here at the back of this pipe. So this guy is well tipped out of the radiator's way. And it just continues back up then into the other fitting that I have welded on here, into the intake, into the throttle body, and onwards then, out through the exhaust and all that. So from the front then, this is what I'm looking at. So my intercooler ends about here. I contemplated cutting out a small square there, but the small square I'll be cutting out corresponds to this portion of the intercooler there, which doesn't have any fins at all. So I kind of said, well, there's probably not much point really. So I've got a nice area of the intercooler here, here, and here. So I should have plenty of airflow through the front of the car anyway, to maybe work some magic, do some intercooling. So that's my intercooler pipework. Finished off there. So I'm happy enough with this. It's close to my bottle here. Might just bend my clamp here a little bit more, push it out of the way. So another step closer.